If you haven't watched the first season of Will's story, go watch it first, then come back so we can continue the rest of the events. Before moving on to the new events, let's take a quick look at what happened before. The last events ended after everyone safely escaped from the dungeon incident, where Will used magic for the first time, but in a way, unlike anyone else. The only person who understood the truth behind that power was Finn, who appeared for the first time alongside the strongest mage, Aaron Oldking. After that, the final exams for the 6th year students began. These exams would decide whether they could advance to the tower or not. Now, the students enter the dungeon for the second time, forming a single team to face the Hellhound, a monster worth 110 points. If you remember, it was the same monster they tried to defeat during the practical exam, but circumstances prevented them from doing so back then. This time, however, they defeat it with ease. After that, the story shifts to the teacher's room inside the academy, where everyone learns that only the final exam remains. All the teachers are shocked because one student managed to get a perfect score on every exam, and that student is Will. Werkner is happier than anyone else, and one of his fellow teachers congratulates him because the student he has placed all his hopes on is now only one step away from achieving his dream. Elsewhere, Will is studying hard inside the library with Rosti. It is revealed that he only needs one more point to reach the required total and finally climb the tower. As for the Hellhound mission, the team joined it only so Will could earn practical exam points, while the other members did not actually need to participate because they already had enough points. Now, the only thing left for Will is tomorrow's final exam. Rosti asks whether Will has earned any points in the spellcasting exam, and Will replies that he already received 5 points from Professor Edward's test. Meanwhile, the story returns to the rest of their friends. Cyan and Julius continue their usual argument, while Lihanna talks with Wignall and tells him that she feels he has changed a lot. Wignall replies that the same is true for him because the fake smile he always wore has completely disappeared. He admits that it is all thanks to Will, who helped him discover his true self. Night falls, and Will continues studying inside the library. Colette comes to check on him and brings him some food, only to find that he has fallen asleep on top of his books from exhaustion. She quietly covers him with a blanket. Suddenly, she is startled when she finds Rosti standing behind her, asking what she is doing. She explains that she only came to check on Will and admits that she constantly worries because he keeps pushing himself too hard. That is why she has grown to hate the title of Magia Vander, since it was because of that position that Will had to endure the hardest moments of his life just to stand beside his childhood friend. Rosti quietly admits that he feels exactly the same way. At the same time, the story shifts to the tower, where Olivia appears with her assistant. Soon, the Lady of Wind arrives and teases her a little before Zack, the Lord of Lightning, joins them. It is revealed that this is no ordinary meeting because an important event known as Terminlia will soon take place, and they are the ones responsible for it. The next morning arrives, bringing the Academy's final exam. Professor Edward is the supervisor, making Will nervous because he fears Edward might deliberately try to harm him. Edward enters the classroom and tells everyone that the exam will be extremely easy since it contains only one question, and anyone who answers it will receive the full 6 points. He hands out the exam papers, and everyone begins reading the question. What is magic? What are the fundamentals of activating it? And what does it feel like when you use it? Everyone is stunned because the question looks incredibly simple. But in reality, only someone capable of using magic can answer it. At the same time, everyone begins worrying about Will's fate. The moment he reads the question, it feels as if he is falling from a great height, and every bit of hope inside him shatters because no matter how hard he tries, he can never answer a question like that. Even so, Will refuses to give up. Instead, he begins writing about his own feelings toward magic. He describes it as a distant miracle that he can never reach, no matter how hard he tries. Throughout the entire time, Olivia never leaves his thoughts, and his only goal is to stand beside her. After the exam ends, Werkner angrily confronts Edward and demands to know why he did such a thing to Will when he knew perfectly well that Will could never answer that question. Edward pushes him aside and says that the real mistake belongs to Werkner and the headmistress because they were the ones who allowed a student incapable of using magic to chase the dream of reaching the tower in the first place. He insists that what he did was actually the greatest kindness he could offer Will. Unfortunately, the results are announced, and Will's name appears among the students who failed. His total remains at 7,199 points, and the final decision is clear. He is eliminated from the tower. That night, Will sits alone outside the academy, crying after the last thread of hope has finally been cut away. Rosti comes to comfort him and tells him that he fixed his glasses. However, Will is completely lost in thought, so Rosti quietly sits beside him and tries to cheer him up. Meanwhile, Colette gathers with the rest of their friends, and they all begin searching for Will, but they cannot find him anywhere. Julius then tells everyone not to worry about what happened before insulting Will. Wignall immediately becomes furious and orders him to take those words back. Julius replies that they are all living in a fantasy. In this world, magic is everything, and anyone without it is worth nothing. According to him, what happened to Will was simply the natural outcome. At that moment, Werkner arrives. Seeing everyone gathered because of Will, he tells them to go enjoy the festival while he searches for Will himself. It is revealed that this is the final night of the year when a grand celebration called the Terminlia Festival takes place. It is the most important night of the year because the Magia Vander gather to restore the barrier, which gradually weakens over time. This ritual has continued for more than 500 years, so everyone prepares for it with extreme caution because even a single mistake could lead to disaster. The 5 Magia Vander appear before the cheering crowd. When the time finally comes, everyone raises their magic wands toward the sky as the Magia Vander begin chanting the Terminlia spell, restoring the barrier once again. With that, the old year officially comes to an end, and the entire city begins celebrating. However, the happy ending does not last for long. At that very moment, black letters begin appearing across the sky, the same strange symbols connected to the headless. Immediately afterward, gates of darkness start opening all over the city, and terrifying monsters pour out of them, beginning to destroy everything in their path. At that very moment, the Headless appears alongside his companion, who explains that the Magia Vander have exhausted all of their magic power while restoring the barrier, so they will be unable to fight for some time. Meanwhile, Will realizes that these gates are the very same ones he had seen before inside the dungeon. Chaos spreads across the city as the mages rush to evacuate the civilians as quickly as possible. Among them are the high-ranking mage Sarah and the fire user Roji. Sarah uses her magic to create creatures that fight the monsters, while Roji supports her alongside the other fire mages. With one massive attack, they wipe out most of the monsters. However, a giant monster walks out of the flames completely unharmed. Roji tries to attack it again, but it has no effect. Suddenly, the monster moves at incredible speed and slices Roji in half with its sword, killing him instantly. Sarah is horrified when she realizes that the weapon it carries is a mage killer, a weapon capable of absorbing magic completely. Meanwhile, the headmistress watches everything from the academy walls. She realizes that the enemy has successfully mass-produced mage killer weapons and deliberately chose this moment to attack. She wonders if their target is only the capital, but quickly dismisses the idea. One of the professors asks her to send mages to the other academy, but she refuses because she believes the attack on the capital is nothing more than a distraction. Instead, she orders everyone to protect the tower. At the same time, the Magia Vander gather, after receiving reports confirming that the capital is being destroyed. They find themselves in an extremely difficult situation because they have already exhausted most of their magic power. Even so, Aaron orders none of them to leave their positions, explaining that if even one part of the barrier collapses, it will lead to disaster and allow the celestial host to take over their world. Elsewhere, Iris watches the destruction spreading across the city and feels powerless. Suddenly, she notices a girl trying to rescue her younger sister from beneath the rubble while a monster approaches them. Iris immediately attacks it, but its sword absorbs all of her magic. Just before it can kill the girl, Will appears and cuts off the monster's arm. After that, Will begins cutting down every monster that stands in his way. Even though he is terrified and trembling, he forces himself to keep fighting. At that moment, Rosti calls out to him and tells him to focus only on the monsters carrying mage killer weapons, because the other mages can deal with the remaining monsters. Will immediately follows his advice and starts hunting them down one after another. When Iris sees this, she regains some hope. However, she also realizes that Will cannot face such an overwhelming number of enemies alone. Aaron then contacts her and orders her to summon the dwarf warriors. Using her magic, she broadcasts an announcement across the entire city, declaring that the ban preventing dwarves from fighting has been lifted and ordering the mages to cooperate with them to defeat the enemy. Meanwhile, Werkner heads to the dwarves' headquarters and asks for their help, while Edward orders the students to fight as best as they can, with rescuing civilians taking top priority. During the battle, Lihana notices that the monsters briefly stop moving whenever they absorb magic. She quickly comes up with a plan and shares it with everyone. They attack the monsters at the same time and pin them down, allowing Colette to drop the giant statue standing in the center of the city on top of them. The strategy works perfectly, and they successfully eliminate the monsters. Afterward, Laihana tells everyone to rely on physical weapons instead of magic whenever possible. At that very moment, the dwarves finally arrive in the city and begin wiping out the monsters. The Headless and his companion Mars watch everything unfold. Marze comments that their enemies adapted much faster than expected because Aaron's group had already discovered their secret weapon. That forced them to launch the attack before the higher institution could analyze it, but their haste also meant they had to attack with only a limited number of troops. The Headless calmly tells him not to worry, because it is finally time to send out the dessert. At that moment, a strange gate opens near Will, and a monster completely different from the others steps out. In less than a second, it appears right in front of Will and lands a devastating blow that sends him flying through several buildings. The monster immediately chases after him, giving him no chance to catch his breath. After that, the story shifts deep inside the dungeon, where Finn attacks a man and tells him that he knows he is the one who created the mage killer weapons. Finn demands that he reveal their plan, but the man simply laughs and says it is already too late because the surface is being destroyed at that very moment. Returning to Will, the monster continues its relentless assault. Will barely manages to dodge 2 attacks, but those strikes alone make him realize that the creature standing before him is even stronger than Duke. Meanwhile, Sarah recognizes the monster and reveals that it is a monster from the 40th floor. It became infamous for its terrifying strength after killing one of the Magia Vander in the past. Its name is Defender. Will realizes that his only option is to run away from Defender. However, 2 students happen to be directly in his path, and Defender is about to kill them. Will jumps in to save them, giving them enough time to escape. The monster then lands a powerful blow that sends Will flying before catching up to him, smashing him into the ground and preparing to finish him off. Just before Defender delivers the final strike, Donnan arrives with the rest of the dwarves and confronts the monster. At the same time, Iris orders the remaining mages to gather at the battlefield. However, this is exactly what the Headless wanted. Defender pulls out its core and begins absorbing the power of every monster that has been killed throughout the city. The mages immediately realize they have fallen into a trap. The dwarves try to stop the absorption before it is complete, but Marzi blocks their path. Right before everyone's eyes, Defender transforms into a far more powerful form. The moment the transformation is complete, it begins slaughtering both the mages and the dwarves without mercy. Watching the massacre unfold, Will realizes that he has no choice but to use the same power he awakened earlier inside the dungeon. At that moment, Rosti appears and tells Will to grab his sword before directing magic toward it. However, before the magic can reach Will, Defender suddenly appears and stops it. The monster then attacks Rosti, cuts off his arm, and leaves him collapsing into a pool of blood. Will is consumed by rage and charges at Defender with everything he has. Despite his injuries, Rosti is still alive and tells Kiki to go find everyone and have them protect Will. By then, Will is already struggling terribly against Defender. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot even land a single hit. Defender delivers another crushing blow, leaving Will unable to move. At that moment, he loses all hope of surviving and becomes certain that he is about to die. The monster slowly walks toward him and raises its sword. Suddenly, Will is thrown away from the building. When he turns around, he realizes that Rosti took the fatal stab in his place, sacrificing his own life to save his friend. For Will, time completely stops. He cannot believe that his best friend has just died before his eyes. At that moment, Werkner arrives and forces him onto the dragon. Meanwhile, another crisis unfolds among the Magia Vander. Zyg stands up and prepares to head for the battlefield, but Cariot tries to convince him that doing so would be a terrible mistake because if the barrier collapses, the entire world, not just the city, will be destroyed. However, Zyg refuses to stand by while innocent people die before his eyes. He prepares to leave, but a flaming arrow suddenly blocks his path. It is Cariot's declaration that he will stop Zyg by force if necessary. As for Olivia, she has been silently watching everything unfold. Suddenly, she stands up, walks toward Aaron, and asks him to cancel the order he gave. Aaron refuses, insists that he will not change his decision, and orders her to return to her position. But will she listen to him? Of course not. She unleashes her power and freezes the entire area. She looks at him and says, "Listen carefully. There is nothing that will stop me from saving the people I care about. If you stand in my way, I will remove you without hesitation." At that moment, Olivia openly challenges the strongest member of the Magia Vander, leaving everyone in complete shock. Meanwhile, Werkner watches everything from above as disasters continue to spread throughout the city. Neither the mages nor the dwarves are able to turn the situation around anymore, and their only remaining hope is Will. However, Will has completely broken down and can no longer gather the strength to fight. He begins crying and says that he is just as helpless as he was on the day Olivia was taken away from him. Nothing has changed. He is still nothing more than a failure who cannot protect his friends. In despair, he wonders if everything happened simply because he is the only person who cannot use magic. He then screams at Werkner, demanding to know why he alone was born with such a curse. But Werkner has no answer. At that very moment, Mars appears before them and declares that he has come to kill Will because, to him, Will is even more troublesome than the dwarves. Elsewhere, Colette is fighting alongside the other students when Kiki suddenly arrives, badly injured. Colette immediately realizes that something must have happened to Will and asks Kiki to lead her to him. Seeing what is happening, Sion decides to go with them. Along the way, they manage to defeat several monsters, but Defender suddenly appears before them. The moment Colette tries to attack, her magic is completely nullified. Nor is this tragedy limited to them alone. The entire capital has become a battlefield. The wounded and the dead are everywhere, and everyone continues fighting until their very last breath, despite their exhaustion and despair caused by the overwhelming number of enemies. Meanwhile, Edward orders the injured dwarves to head toward the city center. One of the female warriors becomes furious and asks if he expects them to sacrifice their lives as nothing more than shields to protect humans. Before she can finish speaking, one of the monsters attacks her, but Edward jumps in to save her and takes the blow instead. She is stunned by his actions, but Edward explains that they are facing an enemy especially dangerous to mages, which makes the lives of the dwarves far more valuable than his own. He then sincerely asks them to head to the city center. Amid all the chaos, Iris stands there after losing all hope. Suddenly, she hears a voice she knows very well. Finn has finally arrived on the battlefield. His first question is simple: where is Will? After that, the story returns to the battle between Marzi and Werkner. Will regains consciousness and finds himself lying on the ground, with the dragon's lifeless body beside him. Confused, he has no idea where he is until Werkner walks out of the smoke, suffering from a fatal wound. It is yet another devastating blow for Will. First, he lost Rosti, and now one of the people dearest to him, Werkner, is dying before his eyes. Werkner begs him not to give up because he is everyone's last remaining hope. However, Will desperately asks how someone as weak as him, someone who cannot even use magic, could ever become anyone's hope when he cannot even protect the people closest to him. Werkner walks toward him, embraces him with the little strength he has left, and finally confesses that he has been lying to him all this time. The truth is, Will can actually use magic. Will freezes in complete shock, unable to believe what he has just heard. He tries to ask more questions, but Werkner passes away before saying another word. At that exact moment, Will hears someone's voice behind him. What do you think your magic really is? Finn has finally arrived, carrying his sword. He assures Will that Werkner is not dead yet, before telling him that the only thing he should think about now is his true magic. He explains that Will's magic is the light capable of opening every closed door. Then he tells him to stand up because the stage is finally ready for the hero to appear. But Will cannot understand a single word he is saying. Finn then explains that the source of his true magic has always existed inside his own heart. It is his will. Even then, Will loses hope once again and asks how his will alone could possibly be considered magic. Finn becomes furious. He tells Will that he is completely wrong and orders him to stand up and experience his own magic for himself. He tells him to remember his origins and discover who he truly is. After that, Finn cuts himself and lets a single drop of blood fall onto the sword. A mysterious power immediately bursts from it. Will grabs the sword, and memories from his entire past begin flashing before his eyes. He can hardly believe that the moment has finally arrived, the moment he will use magic for the very first time. The instant his hand touches the sword, an overwhelming power erupts from his body, and his hair turns completely white. At that moment, he feels as if he has become an entirely different person. He then rushes through the city at incredible speed, destroying every monster that stands in his way. To everyone watching, he looks like a brilliant light that has appeared to save them from destruction. Within seconds, that light spreads across the city and restores hope to everyone. At that very moment, Sion is desperately fighting a monster after reaching his absolute limit. Colette begs him to run away, but he refuses because he does not want to be less courageous than Will. He charges straight toward the monster without hesitation, and at that exact moment, Will arrives and joins the battle. After that, the story goes back 500 years into the past, where an important meeting takes place between two people. One of them is Finn, while the other is Mercedes, the Great Witch, and the very first person to create the celestial barrier. The two of them are searching for a way to save their world before the barrier collapses and the celestial host takes control of it. Mercedes then entrusts Finn with a small child. It is never revealed whether that child is actually Will or not. She tells Finn that she will take responsibility for the magic wands, while he must protect the one and only sword. The magic wands symbolize the mages, while the sword represents the person who cannot use magic. In this story, that person is Will. The purpose of everything they planned was to find the one person capable of wielding the fifth element, the only hope left to save the world. Returning to the present, Finn watches Will from afar and quietly apologizes to Mercedes for taking so many years. Afterward, the story shifts back to Will's battle against Defender. Both Sion and Colette are completely stunned when they realize that the warrior standing before them is actually Will himself. The final battle between Will and Defender finally begins. It is a true one-on-one duel, but this time everything is completely different. With a single slash of his sword, Will launches Defender all the way to the academy. The headmistress has no idea what is happening until she suddenly sees the monster hurtling toward them. She immediately creates a barrier that stops Defender before he can crash into the academy. A moment later, Will appears before everyone and charges toward Defender with all his strength. Their collision is so powerful that it shakes the entire capital, making every citizen realize that a legendary battle is taking place. One after another, they all rush toward the battlefield. At the same time, the members of the Magia Vander watch everything unfold in complete disbelief. On the battlefield, Sarah sees Will and remembers watching him fight before. However, she is shocked to see that he is now able to fight Defender on completely equal terms. At that very moment, Edward arrives. Sarah immediately asks him who that warrior is, but Edward himself can hardly believe that the person standing before him is really Will. Soon afterward, all the students arrive as well and witness the battle. Some of them think about stepping in to help him, but the others stop them, insisting that they would only get in Will's way. That frustrates everyone because they all want to help him in any way they can. At that very moment, the legendary Sion arrives and raises his voice to cheer for Will. Soon the rest of the team joins him, and before long, every student and citizen in the city is shouting Will's name, placing all of their hopes on him. Their encouragement reaches Will and fills him with happiness. Even though he hid his true feelings for many years, he always wished that everyone would finally acknowledge him. At last, that wish has finally come true. Will charges toward Defender with all his strength, but his sword suddenly shatters, leaving everyone terrified for him. The moment Olivia sees it, she tries to move to help him, but Cariot reminds her that none of the Magia Vander are allowed to leave their positions. Olivia calmly replies that she is not leaving. She only wants to stand up and get some fresh air. Suddenly, an icy sword forms out of thin air and flies toward Will on its own. The instant he sees it, he realizes that Olivia created it. He absorbs its power into his own sword, transforming the broken blade into a massive sword of ice by using the very same skill he once used against Duke inside the dungeon. However, the sword is now a magical weapon, which means it should have no effect on a mage killer weapon. Yet Will swings it with all his strength and easily shatters Defender's weapon, as if it were nothing more than a piece of glass. Marze completely loses his composure. He cannot understand how such a thing is even possible, because that weapon was specifically designed to resist magic. He begins questioning Will's true identity, nor is Marze the only one left speechless. The members of the Magia Vander are equally shocked because they realize that Will did not use ordinary magic. He awakened the legendary fifth element. Aaron then looks at Finn and quietly says that it seems he has finally found him. Back on the battlefield, Will continues attacking without mercy, while Defender desperately tries to defend itself. However, Will effortlessly avoids every attack before delivering a powerful slash that freezes Defender in place. At that moment, everyone feels as if Olivia herself is fighting beside him. Mars cannot stand what he is seeing and asks the Headless to interfere. The Headless immediately opens countless gates across the battlefield, and endless monsters begin pouring out until they completely fill the area. But none of that makes any difference to Will. Will thrusts his sword into the ground and decides to unleash his true power. He casts a spell that transforms the battlefield into what looks like a magnificent palace of ice. At the same time, countless blades of ice erupt from the ground, piercing every monster and erasing them from existence. In the end, only Defender remains. Will enlarges his sword before charging straight at Defender and delivering the final blow, splitting the monster cleanly in half. Defender's body immediately turns into a massive block of ice before completely shattering into countless pieces. Finally, the enormous ice palace created by Will slowly begins disappearing in a breathtaking scene that leaves everyone speechless. The people throughout the city watch in amazement, overwhelmed with joy now that the danger has finally passed. From a distance, Finn watches everything with a smile, because Will has surpassed every expectation he ever had. He quietly tells Will that his true journey begins today, and that he will become the world's final hope before speaking to Mercedes in his heart, saying that everything starts now. After that, the story goes back 3 years into the past, where Will is completely heartbroken after being separated from Olivia. During that time, Rosti approaches him for the first time, introduces himself, and tells Will that they will be roommates. He also says that he hopes they can become good friends. That was the beginning of their friendship. However, it is revealed that everything Will has just seen is nothing more than a dream while he remains unconscious, crying over the friend he lost. Will is actually lying inside the headmistress's office, where she is treating him while Finn stands beside her. At the same time, Will's white hair slowly begins turning black again. The headmistress tells Finn that they used magic to alter Will's memories so he could return to living his normal life once again. Finn walks over to him, notices the tears on his face, and quietly wonders what Will is seeing in his dream. Sometime later, Professor Werkner finally regains consciousness and finds his friend standing beside him. The very first thing he asks about is Will. Edward reassures him that Will is safe and is currently receiving treatment inside the headmistress's office. Meanwhile, the students receive the news that both Werkner and Will are safe, filling everyone with relief and happiness. The boy who was once rejected by everyone has now become a hero in their eyes. Everyone's except Julius, who still refuses to like him. After that, the story shifts to Iris as she presents Aaron with a detailed report about the incident, including every piece of evidence and every photograph connected to the identities of the two people responsible for the disaster. Aaron orders her to assign the investigation to their respective groups while making the reconstruction of the capital their highest priority. He then asks about Will and wonders how they remained unaware of his existence for all those years. Iris explains that the headmistress had secretly kept him hidden inside the academy the entire time. Aaron becomes angry after learning that the headmistress made such a decision on her own. He immediately orders that starting from that day, Will be placed under Finn's direct supervision. At that moment, the rest of the Magia Vander arrive and apologize for being late. Aaron orders them to begin investigating the people responsible for the attack and determine whether they are connected to the dungeon incident. Unfortunately, there is almost no solid evidence. Even so, Aaron believes they may be survivors of the Great War that took place 10 years ago. Eleanor immediately disagrees, insisting that such a thing is impossible because countless sacrifices were made to eliminate those people. Zack then deliberately provokes her by asking whether she is scared and whether she plans to hide like a rat if hell returns once again. His words immediately succeed in provoking her. Eleanor unleashes a terrifying attack whose impact echoes throughout the capital, but Zack easily dodges it. The two are only moments away from starting a real fight before Aaron steps in and stops them. At that moment, Carriot notices that his assistant is missing. He calls out to her and asks why she did not attend the meeting. She replies that she is feeling tired today and decided not to come. Even so, she seems to be troubled by something. After that, the story follows Colette and Lihana as they place a flower in memory of Rosti. When Lihana asks about him, Colette explains that Rosti was Will's closest friend and that he cared deeply about him. She is certain that losing him will leave a deep scar on Will's heart. Sometime later, Finn is overseeing the reconstruction work taking place across the capital. While walking through the city, he runs into Iris, who calls him by the name Envis. Finn immediately asks her once again not to call him by that name, but Iris completely ignores his request, making it clear that the relationship between the two of them is far from friendly. Iris tells him that she came to ask him for only one thing, to stay out of Will's life. It seems she says this because she has started caring about Will, but Finn calmly replies that he cannot grant her request. After that, another memory from the past appears, showing Will and Rosti together. Rosti asks Will whether he would be sad if he suddenly disappeared from his life, or died one day. Will immediately becomes angry and tells him never to say something like that again. However, Rosti smiles and tells him that if it ever happens, he does not want Will to be sad because he will always be watching over him. It is almost as if Rosti was leaving behind a message telling Will that one day he would disappear from his life. Returning to the present, Will wakes up inside his room. The moment he sees Rosti's empty place, sadness fills his heart once again. However, he remembers Rosti's words, regains his courage, puts on his uniform, and gets ready, because today is the graduation ceremony. Everyone gathers inside the academy as the headmistress begins the ceremony by offering her condolences for the disaster that struck the capital and for everyone who lost their lives. However, she explains that this tragedy is not the first and will certainly not be the last. That is why they must continue moving forward and grow stronger than ever before. She adds that this is a special day because a new generation of mages is about to enter the world, and some of them will also ascend to the tower. After that, Edward steps forward and begins calling the names of every graduate, including all the students who passed. Among them is Will. The headmistress then announces the names of the students selected to ascend to the tower. Each of them receives a white hat as proof of their achievement. The awards are presented according to their final rankings, with Lihana being the first to step forward, followed by the rest of the selected students. Will grows disappointed because his name is never called. Eventually, the number of chosen students reaches 49. They are the ones who successfully collected the required number of points, and the graduation ceremony appears to be over. However, the headmistress suddenly announces that one more student has qualified by fulfilling the second requirement for entering the tower, creating a brand new spell. Although this student failed to collect the required number of points, his magic saved countless lives. Because of that, he has become a source of pride for the academy and deserves this honor. The creator of that magic is Will Surfort. Will is completely stunned when he hears his own name. Edward immediately tries to object, but the headmistress stops him. She says that she knows some people will disagree with her decision before asking everyone who supports it to applaud. Silence fills the hall. For the second time, Will loses hope. Then a single person begins clapping. It is Sion. Moments later, everyone inside the hall joins in, applauding together and openly acknowledging that Will truly deserves this honor. At last, his dream becomes reality. Will officially becomes one of the students who will ascend to the tower. Werkner breaks down in tears of joy, while Edward still looks unhappy. However, he never hated Will. He simply understood what it felt like to have dreams far beyond your abilities, and he never wanted Will to experience the same pain. Werkner smiles and tells him that Will is stronger than he thinks and will surely overcome every challenge waiting for him. At that moment, Rosti appears, quietly watching the ceremony from above. It is impossible to tell whether it is really Rosti or only his spirit. The mysteries surrounding him remain unsolved, making it clear that his story is far from over and that much more about him will be revealed in the future. After that, the story briefly returns to the past, showing young Will and Olivia looking up at the sky together while dreaming of reaching the tower someday. Now, that dream is finally about to come true. The day they meet again is drawing near. Afterward, the group visits a clothing shop that sells uniforms for the tower's residents, where they buy their official outfits. The uniforms look incredibly elegant, and everyone is excited because they are finally going to the tower. However, Julius seems bothered by something. Colette walks over to ask what is wrong, but he angrily brushes her off. Lihana then explains that he is upset because no faction inside the tower has chosen him. Unlike the rest of them, Lihana has received an invitation from the Lightning faction, while Colette has been chosen by the Earth faction. A little later, everyone notices that Will is missing. The shop owner tells them that Will stopped by earlier, picked up his uniform, and quickly left to collect his new sword. Sure enough, Will is now inside the dwarves' workshop, where Donan presents him with his new sword. It was specially crafted in white and gold so it would perfectly match his new uniform. Will is amazed by the weapon and asks how much it costs, but Donan refuses to accept any payment, saying that it is simply a gift to thank Will for saving them. After that, Will reunites with his friends, and together, they head toward the tower. There, the 50 successful students gather together as Sarah welcomes them. She opens the gate leading to an entirely different world, where a new chapter of their lives is about to begin. The students step through and find themselves inside a dark space. Sarah then opens another gate beneath them, carrying everyone upward. When they finally arrive, they are greeted by an incredibly beautiful place known as the White City. The entire city is covered in white, making it feel as though it belongs to another world. This city is the first floor of the tower. The students are amazed because it is a fully developed city, perfectly suited for everyday life. Sarah explains that whether they remain here or eventually leave depends entirely on them before instructing everyone to head toward the welcoming ceremony. Before that, however, the students spend some time exploring the city and enjoying themselves. At that moment, Cyan approaches Will and warns him not to relax too much because this place is far from the paradise it appears to be. Meanwhile, Julius remains frustrated, convinced that the rumors he heard were true all along. Soon afterward, the students enter the ceremony hall, where they find representatives from many different academies waiting for them, along with the president of the higher institution. Every member of the Magia Vander is also present. Wignall looks toward Eleanor, but she immediately turns her face away the moment she notices him. The exact same thing happens between Will and Olivia. Will cannot understand why she reacts that way. Sarah officially begins the ceremony of colors and explains that only the students selected during the Magic Festival will receive the blessing of color. The members of the Magia Vander then cast their magic on each student they selected, causing every student's uniform to change color according to the faction that accepted them. The Fire faction receives red uniforms. The Wind faction receives green. The remaining factions receive their own unique colors. However, some students were not chosen by any faction. Among them are Will and Julius. As a result, both of them remain dressed in white. Which leaves only one question. Why didn't Olivia choose Will? The story briefly returns to the previous day, where Olivia is angrily confronting her assistant. Olivia reminds her that she had promised Will would be chosen once he reached the tower, but now she is saying that it is impossible. Her assistant tries to explain that Will's situation is extremely unusual. Since he cannot use magic, the others would never accept him if Olivia chose him immediately. Everyone would simply believe he was unqualified and only reach the tower because of favoritism. That is why Will must first prove his strength to everyone. Returning to the present, each student walks toward the faction that selected them, while the remaining students stay where they are. Those were the very rumors that upset Julius after discovering they were true. Simply reaching the tower does not make someone special. Some people remain on the first floor forever. They are treated as the tower's trash and are known as the colorless. That is exactly why the first floor earned the nickname the Graveyard of the Magic Wand. However, Sarah continues speaking and tells them that they will be given a second chance to prove themselves before the factions and earn their recognition. She then opens a gate, and mechanical monsters emerge from it before immediately attacking the students. Their task is to destroy every one of them. Most of the students struggle because these machines are equivalent to 30-point monsters. Some try attacking them with magic, but it has no effect because the machines are protected by armor that reflects magic. At that moment, Julius easily destroys one of the machines, making it obvious that he has become much stronger since the Magic Festival. His performance immediately attracts everyone's attention, yet none of the other factions choose him. Since he uses the ice element, even Olivia shows no interest in recruiting him. Still, Julius is delighted when he notices everyone staring at him in admiration. However, Julius is disappointed when Olivia refuses to even look at him. Meanwhile, Will carefully studies the machines instead of attacking immediately. Once he understands their movements, he puts on his glasses, rushes forward, and slices one of them in half with a single strike, astonishing everyone with his incredible speed. He continues destroying the machines until more suddenly appear. Julius fires several ice spells, but one accidentally flies toward Olivia. Will instantly jumps in front of her, absorbs the spell into his sword, then destroys every remaining machine. Everyone is left speechless. Will has proven beyond doubt that he deserves to stand among the best. A magic circle immediately appears beneath him, as the Ice faction chooses him first. Soon after, the Fire, Earth, Wind, and Darkness factions also select him. For the first time in the tower's history, every major faction chooses the same person, giving Will the right to join whichever faction he wants. Naturally, he chooses the Ice faction. However, Creon, president of the higher institution, suddenly objects. Although he acknowledges Will's contribution during the Termanlia incident, he insists that Whis is not true magic because it relies on someone else's mana. In his opinion, someone like Will has no place in the Tower of Magic. To settle the matter, Creon proposes another test. 2 monsters designed specifically to fight dwarves are brought before Will. Creon destroys one with a simple spell, explaining that even the weakest magic can defeat them. Will repeatedly cuts the monsters apart, but they regenerate every time. His classmates want to help, but Creon refuses, insisting Will must prove himself alone. Eventually, Creon ends the test, declaring Will unqualified. He also announces that Will's ability, Whis, will remain under the higher institution's supervision, so it can be thoroughly studied. Some members of the Majavander support the decision, but Olivia is clearly furious. Before the argument escalates, Zeig announces that a second test will be held only 1 week later instead of 6 months because the Termanlia incident has left the tower desperately short of manpower. Although Creon dislikes the decision, everyone is forced to accept it. As everyone leaves, Will collapses. Julius thinks he is crying. Instead, Will laughs. After overcoming countless hardships, he thought he had finally achieved his dream, only for everything to fall apart again. Even so, he refuses to give up and decides to prepare for the next test. That night, Zach's assistant asks why he did not recruit Will. Zach simply replies that he prefers people who create power with their own hands. The next day, Will searches the library for any way to use Whis to generate his own magic. Later, several students who also failed, including 2 of Cyan's friends, invite him to train in the dungeon. Will is about to accept when Julius suddenly appears and announces that Will train with him instead. Everyone, including Will, is shocked. Julius explains that fighting monsters will not solve Will's problem. Instead, he wants to help him understand the true nature of Whis. When Will asks why, Julius simply replies that he now considers him a friend. Will is genuinely happy to hear that. In reality, however, Julius has another motive. He hopes that helping Will pass the next test will earn Olivia's approval and allow him to join the Ice faction. The two head to a training ground. Will transforms his sword into an ice sword, while Julius summons several tiny birds made of ice. Because the birds contain only a trace of magic, Julius plans to use them to teach Will precise magical control. Will points out that Whis absorbs magic rather than creating it. Julius then suggests a different approach. Instead of producing magic, Will should learn to permanently store the magic he absorbs. The birds are perfect for this training because they react to even the smallest amount of mana, forcing Will to release magic with perfect precision. Will is impressed by the idea and believes it may actually succeed. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman secretly watches the two through magic. Remember her. She will become a very important character later. Despite training for a long time, Will is still unable to control the amount of magic he releases. As a result, Will keeps destroying every ice bird in front of him. They eventually discover that the longest he can store magic is only 50 minutes. After that, all the stored power disappears completely. They also realize that using Whis drains his stamina tremendously, making this the first time Will discovers that his ability comes with such a serious drawback. Will is not the only one who becomes exhausted. Julius also reaches his limit and can barely remain standing. Even so, he stubbornly insists on continuing their training. Seeing Julius in that condition, Will tells him that they should not waste their time on something they do not even know will work. Instead, they should spend that time searching for the true nature of Whis itself. It turns out that Will already searched through the Academy library but found nothing. He even asked Professor Werkner, yet Werkner did not know enough about the ability either. That is why Will wants permission to search the tower's library. Julius angrily tells him that he is already doing exactly that. He obtained permission and has been searching through the library himself. He also asked his teacher to look for Finn because apparently Finn knows more about Whis than anyone else. Julius then insists that they have no time to waste and should continue training. However, the moment he tries to move, dizziness overwhelms him because of his exhaustion. Will asks why Julius is going this far just to help him. Julius replies that he is not helping because he likes him. He is simply acting in his own best interest. As a noble of the Rimberg family, he is expected to reach the very top. That is why he decided to make use of Will to achieve his own goal. At that moment, Will realizes how seriously Julius takes his responsibilities as a noble. He remembers that after losing their duel, Julius personally went to apologize to the dwarves and kept his promise. Will smiles and tells him that he never expected him to be such a kind person. Those words completely catch Julius off guard. Old memories suddenly begin flooding back into his mind. He immediately leaves, claiming that he is going somewhere to rest for a while. Even so, he cannot stop thinking about what Will said. The story then returns to the past, when Julius was still a little boy. One day, he is treating an injured cat when his maid, Anna, happens to walk by. She praises him for what he did and tells him that she has never met a child as kind as he is. Julius is overjoyed by her praise and asks whether she likes him. Anna smiles and tells him that, of course, she does. Not only her, everyone there likes him as well. She then gives him her necklace as a gift. Because of his innocence, Julius takes her words literally. He does not understand the true meaning of the love she was talking about. However, one day Anna gets married and leaves. In his childish imagination, Julius convinces himself that she betrayed him because he believed she loved him in the same way. That was the day he decided to kill the kind Julius inside himself. From then on, he chose to become a selfish person who would use everyone around him for one purpose only, his own benefit. Yet despite believing he had abandoned his past, Julius still carries Anna's necklace with him, even now. That is exactly why Will's words disturbed him so deeply. Unfortunately, Julius never notices that someone has been watching him the entire time. This time, it is Creon, and his intentions are anything but good. Without warning, Julius is attacked by a magical spell. He instantly creates an ice shield to protect himself. The attackers turn out to be 3 mages from the higher institution, who came to capture him and prevent him from continuing Will's training. Outnumbered and already exhausted after the training session, Julius is defeated without much difficulty. Still, he decides to rely on the one thing he excels at, provoking people. He recognizes the 3 mages from their academy days. Since they joined the higher institution before him, Julius mocks them relentlessly, calling them nothing more than worthless weaklings. His taunts work perfectly. All 3 attack him at once, but at the very last moment Will arrives and blocks their attack, protecting Julius. Julius immediately yells at him, asking why he took so long because he was just about to die. The 3 mages prepare to attack again, but a ring of fire suddenly surrounds them. The one responsible is the same witch who had been secretly watching Will and Julius earlier. She introduces herself. Her name is Creedon. Without any introduction, she offers to become their teacher. Julius instantly recognizes that name. Creedon is one of the 7 legends of the tower, known as the Hammer Witch, a mysterious mage rumored to suddenly kidnap talented students and use them for experiments. Creedon laughs and insists that those are only rumors. She does not kidnap anyone. She simply chooses gifted students and trains them. Naturally, both Will and Julius refuse because they find her far too suspicious. So, she simply takes them by force anyway and suggests continuing the conversation somewhere else. Meanwhile, elsewhere inside the tower, Iris is talking with Olivia. She asks why Olivia refused to recruit Julius, even though he is extremely talented, and it would be a waste for him to remain under the higher institution. Olivia refuses because of her personal issues with him and because he constantly bullied Will. Iris then asks what Old King's opinion is regarding Will. Olivia explains that he has no intention of interfering and has decided to let events unfold naturally. Unlike the headmistress, Old King does not approve of allowing a sword to stand among the magic wands. However, he has no objection if Will manages to carve out his own path through his own strength. After that, the story returns to Creedon, who has brought the 2 boys to her secret hideout. The moment Will and Julius enter, they find themselves inside an incredibly luxurious mansion. Creedon warmly welcomes them and invites them to have lunch. The table is filled with every kind of delicious food imaginable. Julius immediately refuses to eat. Then he realizes Will has already started eating. In fact, he is almost finished. Julius asks where they are. Creedon explains that this is her personal hideout and that her student, Sarah, was the one who built it. Both Will and Julius know Sarah well. She is the teacher who supervised the prosperity test and is also one of Werkner's colleagues. Even so, Julius remains suspicious. He believes Creedon might secretly be working for the higher institution and trying to deceive them. To prove that she means them no harm, Creedon reveals her terrifying magic. The entire room instantly fills with countless magic circles belonging to every type of magic, all without her even speaking the name of a single spell. With that simple display, she makes one thing perfectly clear. She could have killed both of them in a single second. She simply chose not to. Realizing the situation he is in, Julius asks what her true objective is and why she wants to train Will. Creedon answers that she has two reasons. The first is her desire to uncover every secret surrounding Whis. The second is to protect both of them from the forces trying to stop them. Those forces are the higher institution. To explain what she means, the story shifts to the headquarters of the higher institution, where Creon is absolutely furious after learning that Will has escaped. He immediately orders his subordinates to intensify the search until Will is found. His assistant cannot understand why Creon is so obsessed with Will, especially when doing so could lead to conflict with one of the Magia Vander. That is when Creon's true nature is finally revealed. He is a mad scientist obsessed with dissection. To him, Will is nothing more than the perfect laboratory specimen, someone who will allow him to uncover the secret behind Whis. Creedon explains all of this to Will, telling him that this is exactly why she wants to protect and train him. She then reveals one final reason. Olivia personally asked her to help him. After laying everything out before him, Creedon leaves the decision entirely up to Will. He can either accept her training or refuse it. In the end, Will accepts without hesitation because he believes she is telling the truth. On top of everything else, Will feels as though he has known Creedon for a very long time, although he has no idea why. Creedon tells him that since he has accepted her offer, they should begin training immediately. She then asks him to take off his clothes. Will does as she says, leaving Julius shocked by the countless scars covering his entire body. He cannot even imagine everything Will has gone through during his life. Creedon places her hand on Will's back and asks about the large scar there. Will explains that he received it when he was a child while trying to protect Olivia. Will then asks what she is doing. Creedon replies that she is searching for the location of the second seal. Neither Will nor Julius understands what she means, but Creedon continues by telling them that their theory was actually correct. Will's magic really does follow the principle of storing magic, just as they had believed. However, there is one thing they never realized. Will has already gone far beyond the stage of storing magic. His body itself has been greedily storing magical power for a very long time. Now, the next step is learning how to use that stored power. Creedon then reminds Will that he has already used magic on his own once before, back when his power first awakened and his hair turned white. That is why they are now going to uncover how he activated it by returning to his memories. Creedon begins drawing a magic circle around him. Once it is complete, she places Will at its center before chanting her spell. You must remember. Remember your roots and your origin. Open the tale of the past and reveal the name of the forbidden blade. Open the path that leads to your own memories. Only there will you find the answer. No one understands the meaning of her words. Suddenly, an enormous surge of magical power fills the room. At the same time, a mysterious key appears on Will's back. The instant the key begins to turn, something completely beyond imagination happens. Will's soul literally leaves his body and plunges deep into the magic circle. He suddenly finds himself in a strange place, surrounded by every memory he has ever experienced. He continues sinking deeper and deeper until everything abruptly comes to a stop. Will slowly opens his eyes, only to experience an enormous shock. He has become a child once again, and Olivia is standing right in front of him. Before anyone can understand what is happening, the story briefly returns to the outside world, where 4 entire days have already passed, while Will remains unconscious. Julius becomes furious and demands to know what is happening to him. Creedon explains that Will is currently diving through his dreams and searching the depths of his own past. Confused, Julius asks how any of this will help Will master Whis. Creedon admits that she is not completely certain because the sword is Finn's field of expertise, not hers. However, Will is a unique case. There is a chance this method will succeed. Meanwhile, Will desperately tries to understand what is happening and how he has somehow returned to the past. At first, he believes Creedon actually sent him back through time. He quickly rejects that idea. No matter how powerful a mage may be, turning back time is impossible. That leaves him with only one conclusion. Everything around him is simply a complete recreation of his own past. While Will is lost in thought, Olivia becomes annoyed with him. He apologizes and promises to pay attention before deciding to simply accept what is happening. Or rather, he has no choice but to relive it. His body moves and responds to Olivia completely on its own, exactly as it did in the past. Even so, Will cannot help feeling happy after being given another chance to relive his childhood adventures with his best friend. He remembers how much he enjoyed spending time with her, playing together and reading stories side by side. Their favorite story was the reason everything began. It inspired them to promise that they would one day climb the tower together. The story tells of a hero who split the heavens with his sword, driving away the darkness and revealing a beautiful sunset. At that moment, Will notices that the illustration in the book looks strangely familiar. The hero drawn there looks exactly like Finn. However, he convinces himself that he is simply imagining things and does not think much about it. After finishing their favorite story, the two continue playing together. Suddenly, the forest is swallowed by complete darkness. A terrifying creature is hiding in an area near its edge. After hearing that monsters have been fleeing toward that place, Olivia decides to take Will there. Filled with childish curiosity, the two set out to investigate. Olivia believes she is strong enough that no monster could ever hurt her. Will suddenly remembers that he really did come to this forest despite the warnings of their father, or rather, the person responsible for the orphanage where they both grew up. The problem is that he cannot remember what happened afterward. Every time he tries to recall it, the memory becomes blurry and distorted. Without warning, a gigantic monster appears and attacks them. It is a massive wolf with a strange crystal piercing through its chest. Will immediately recognizes it as one of the magically created monsters. Judging by its injuries, he realizes that it must have escaped from one of the wars. Olivia immediately steps forward to protect him. She activates her copy ability and begins casting numerous spells at the same time. Even though Will has already lived through this moment once before, he cannot help being amazed by Olivia's incredible power despite her young age. Then, a terrible feeling washes over him. Fragments of his forgotten memories suddenly return. He desperately tries to stop Olivia, but it is already too late. Olivia attacks the wolf with countless ice projectiles. The monster deflects every one of them and sends them back toward her, destroying all of her copies. One stray projectile flies straight toward Will. Will immediately jumps to his feet and shouts for Olivia to run. Instead, she remains on the ground terrified, while still trying to protect him. Will feels completely powerless. Suddenly, he finds himself inside what feels like a vast ocean. It is as though he is drowning and cannot breathe. Even so, he refuses to surrender. He continues encouraging himself until he finally forces his body to move and save Olivia. At the exact moment Olivia attacks the monster again, the reflected ice flies back toward her. Just before it can strike, Will steps in front of her and shields her with his own body. Unfortunately, the price is enormous. Will receives a fatal wound across his back. Olivia is horrified. She breaks down in tears and begs him not to leave her. Meanwhile, Will slowly begins losing consciousness. Once again, he feels himself sinking beneath the water. From that moment onward, all of those memories disappeared. Will is left confused because he clearly remembers that someone saved Olivia back then. He simply has no idea who that person was. Suddenly, a mysterious woman appears before him and orders him to wake up. At that instant, a strange energy begins pouring out from the wound on his back. An intense heat spreads throughout his entire body as only one sentence echoes through his mind. "I must become the sword." His body finally begins moving. Using his own power, Will creates a sword of ice. The wolf immediately charges toward him, but Will effortlessly cuts off one of its arms. The monster attacks again with even greater strength, prompting Olivia to join the fight. Together, the two unleash an overwhelming power that freezes the wolf completely before shattering it into pieces. At last, Will understands everything. His missing memories finally return. He slowly closes his eyes. When he opens them again, Julius is staring directly into his face. Will has finally returned to the real world. Julius immediately starts yelling at him because he remained unconscious for 6 entire days. The test has already begun, and they are running late. Creedon asks whether he finally understands the true nature of his power. Will answers that he finally does. He can now use it. Without wasting another second, Will quickly puts on his clothes before rushing toward the testing grounds alongside Julius. However, before returning to the examination, we first need to see everything that happened during that week. The story shifts back to the tower, where Olivia has been struggling with sadness because of everything that happened, and because she was powerless to help Will. At that moment, Olivia remembers Colette's words about hating the Magia Vander, because Will had suffered for years just to fulfill his dream of joining them. She feels the same guilt, believing that she is the reason his suffering never ended. They made a promise together, but she climbed the tower without him and was never able to help him afterward. She wishes she could ignore everyone, run to him, and embrace him. Instead, she remembers his promise that no obstacle would ever stop him from reaching her. Trusting those words, Olivia decides to wait patiently, believing he will stand beside her one day. But there is something strange. How did Olivia know what Colette said about the Magie of Vander? Looking closer, Colette was actually speaking to Rosti. Could Rosti be connected to Olivia? Or could Olivia herself actually be Rosti? It sounds impossible, yet it explains many mysteries surrounding him. His sudden death also feels far too suspicious, making the mystery even deeper. Meanwhile, Colette and Will's old friends descend from the tower to ask Professor Werkner for help with Will. Werkner reassures them that the Hammer Witch is already involved, so Will should be safe. Even so, they remain worried until Cyan reminds them that no one understands Will better than they do. All they can do now is trust him and wait. Back in the present, the entrance test continues. The students defeat the monsters and are accepted into different factions, including Cyan's two friends, who join the Fire faction. Creon complains that the standards have become too low after the Termanlia incident. However, everyone has already finished except Will and Julius, giving Creon the chance to claim they ran away and that the test should end. Before he finishes speaking, the two arrive and apologize for being late. Unable to stop them, Creon summons the same liquid monsters and orders Will to take the same test. Will prepares to fight while Julius secretly considers helping him. Suddenly, a magic circle appears beneath Julius. Olivia accepts him into the Ice faction and thanks him for helping Will, but tells him to trust Will and leave the battle to him. Julius obeys and leaves. At that moment, Creedon arrives and says Will has finally found the truth. She asks him to show her the world his sword can create. Will recalls the moment he first used magic and finally awakens his power. His sword transforms on its own, and he destroys the monster with a single strike, leaving everyone speechless. Zack is thrilled, while Creedon is delighted with the result. Finn then appears and asks whether he should call her Creedon or headmistress. The truth is finally revealed. Creedon is actually the Academy's headmistress, who has been disguising herself with aging magic. She reveals that Finn also helped from the shadows by giving the dwarves the rare jewel used to forge Will's sword. Finn explains that the jewel supports Will because he is still inexperienced with the fifth element and cannot fully amplify his magic yet. As Finn watches Will, he wonders whether he is truly the one destined to reveal the unknown future. Meanwhile, Will defeats every remaining monster, leaving Creon furious. Although Will wins, using his new power drains an enormous amount of energy, making him realize he must use it carefully. Creon refuses to accept the result, accusing Will of cheating by using a magical sword. Some people actually believe him. Olivia's assistant realizes that only a member of the Magia Vander can settle the situation, but Olivia cannot interfere because of her relationship with Will. She also fears Olivia is on the verge of losing control. At that moment, Zack steps forward. He declares that one attack will be enough to prove whether Will deserves to advance. Will assumes it will be a simple spell. Olivia immediately senses the danger and screams for him to run, but it is too late. Zack unleashes a terrifying attack that engulfs the entire battlefield. When the smoke clears, Will is still standing with only minor injuries. Not only did he survive, he absorbed the attack, transforming his sword into one made entirely of lightning. Although part of the attack still struck him, surviving a direct attack from a member of the Magia Vander is an incredible feat. Zack laughs loudly and officially recognizes Will as someone worthy of reaching the top. When Creon objects again, Zack threatens to test him with the same attack. Terrified, Creon immediately admits that Will deserves to join the higher institution. After years of hardship, Will finally achieves his dream. Olivia runs to him, throws herself into his arms, and cries with joy. Their long-awaited promise has finally been fulfilled. Will wipes away her tears and promises that from now on, he will stand beside her, making Olivia smile once again. Soon afterward, Will must choose which faction to join. Everyone assumes he will choose the Ice faction. However, Zack refuses to allow it. He grabs Will, declares that he belongs to the Lightning faction, and knocks the poor boy unconscious with a bolt of lightning before he can even answer. Zack asks Will if he wants to join the Lightning faction, but Olivia immediately objects. Neither of them is willing to give Will up, Zack believes that anything he wants automatically belongs to him, making everyone see him as an absolute barbarian. The story then flashes back to a shocking moment when Zack points his weapon directly at Eren Old King, demanding to know why the dwarves are forbidden from entering the tower. Carriot explains that they cannot use magic, but Zack argues that their combat abilities would greatly strengthen the tower against the celestial host. Eren simply refuses to explain his reasons. As Zack leaves, Eleanor questions why he is backing down so easily. Zack replies that Eren's refusal to answer only proves there is a real reason, but the time has not come to reveal it. Later, Carriot criticizes Zack for challenging Eren, but Zack says that unlike everyone else, he follows his own beliefs. He warns that the mage's arrogance will eventually cause them to lose against the celestial host. Although everyone sees Zack as a reckless fool, they also know that his overwhelming strength makes him dangerous if he ever becomes their enemy. Back in the present, Zack challenges Olivia to a duel, declaring that the winner will claim Will. Olivia accepts immediately, despite Sarah's attempts to stop them. The battle begins as Olivia carries Will out of the arena before creating a massive palace of ice. Zack instantly appears behind her, but she avoids his attack and creates countless clones, each casting different spells. Even Julius is stunned by the gap between himself and Olivia, who can cast countless spells simultaneously. Despite Olivia's relentless assault, Zack avoids every attack, destroys her clones one after another, and eventually discovers that even the final Olivia is only another clone. The real Olivia has been preparing a massive spell from above, which crashes down with enough force to make everyone raise magical barriers. Even then, Zack emerges completely unharmed. He throws his axe, attacks Olivia from above, smashes her into the ground, destroys her ice palace, and relentlessly pursues her with lightning arrows and close-range attacks. Olivia is eventually forced entirely onto the defensive while Zack dominates the battle. Watching the fight, Creedon asks Finn who has the advantage. Finn answers that although Olivia is a genius spellcaster, Zack is the superior fighter. He also believes Zack's close combat style would suit Will far better. Olivia eventually reaches her limit and is wounded while Will remains unconscious. Julius desperately tries to wake him. At that moment, Olivia notices Will's glasses and remembers why she is fighting. She suddenly manages to wound Zack for the first time, and declares that she will never allow anyone to take Will away from her. Zack is surprised by her determination. Olivia explains that she is fighting to repay everything Will has done for her and refuses to let him lose hope. Excited by her resolve, Zack gathers enormous power while Olivia prepares her own spell. Confident that he will crush her, Zack charges straight toward her, only to be caught by surprise when Olivia activates a spell that freezes magic itself. She freezes the magical energy Zack uses to accelerate his body, temporarily immobilizing him. The spell requires more than half of her magic, explaining why she spent the entire battle fulfilling its activation condition. Olivia immediately lands a powerful punch that sends Zack crashing into the arena stands. However, the battle is far from over. Everyone suddenly hears Zack chanting a full incantation, something he almost never does. Realizing the fight has reached another level, Olivia begins casting her own summoning spell, while the two continue attacking each other. At that moment, Will finally wakes up. Confused, he calls out to Olivia and begs her to stop, but it is already too late. Zack successfully summons his terrifying Lightning Guardian. Moments later, Olivia summons her legendary Ice Phoenix. The two legendary guardians face each other, ready to unleash their full power. Before the two attacks collide, Eleanor's assistants move quickly and create a barrier around the battlefield. The moment the attacks clash, a terrifying explosion fills the entire area, and no one can believe what they are seeing. The power released is so enormous that it shakes the entire tower, with its effects reaching all the way to the academy. As for the spectators inside the tower, they can hardly believe they survived what just happened. It was a battle between two monsters in its purest form. Will becomes terrified for Olivia before finding her lying among the ruins. Zack is in the same condition. Both of them have exhausted all of their power with that final attack. Even so, they decide to continue fighting. However, Carriot and Eleanor intervene at the last moment and stop them. Zack becomes furious and orders Carriot to get out of his way. Carriot tells him that the battle has already reached a dangerous level and must come to an end. More importantly, Lord Eren has arrived, and the two of them should show him some respect. Eren immediately orders them to stop fighting and reminds them that they are members of the Magia Vander. Even so, both refuse to change their minds. They still want to continue until Will's fate is decided. Eren then tells them that there is only one way to settle the matter. Rock, paper, scissors. Everyone is stunned by his suggestion and finds it completely ridiculous. However, Eren continues and warns them that if they refuse to follow his order, he will take Will under his own wing instead. The moment they hear that, both immediately agree and begin playing. For 300 rounds in a row, they continue choosing the exact same move. Eventually, Zack finally wins. Olivia completely breaks down after losing and starts crying like a child while holding tightly onto Will and refusing to let him go. The situation is difficult for Will as well. Still, he tries to calm her down and promises that they will be together again. After that, Olivia's assistant arrives and takes her away. Zack praises Will's behavior, telling him that he expected him to be just as wild as Olivia and refused to accept the result. Will replies that he knows how deeply Olivia is attached to him. Had he reacted differently, she would have done the impossible to keep him beside her, even if it meant starting another battle with a member of the Magia Vander. Will then tells Zack that he has one condition. No matter what happens, he must never kill Olivia. And if Zack has a problem with that, Will kill him and return to her by force. Zack bursts into laughter. He is impressed by Will's way of thinking and agrees to the condition. He then grants Will his blessing. Will's clothes change color, officially making him a member of the Lightning faction. To celebrate this happy occasion and the end of the Prosperity event, all the students who passed gather together for a nighttime celebration. Will finds Lihana completely exhausted. The moment she found a bed, she immediately collapsed and fell asleep. She warns him that this will soon become his normal life now that he has joined the Lightning faction just like her. Shortly afterward, Julius arrives and starts yelling at Will for sitting there and enjoying himself while they are forced to deal with Olivia, who is still crying and has not calmed down at all. He then returns Will's glasses, which had been in his possession. Wignall asks whether the time they spent together has finally made them friends. Julius becomes irritated by his words and immediately walks away. The rest of the boys then arrive and take Will downstairs to celebrate with them. As for Colette, she looks visibly upset. In the past, she was Will's only friend. Now, he has become friends with everyone. She feels jealous because she loves him and misses the days when the two of them spent all their time alone together. At the same time, she does not want to be selfish because Will suffered from loneliness in the past. Lihana and Wignall encourage her, telling her that if those are her true feelings, she should confess them to him before she regrets staying silent. Colette finally gathers her courage and decides to go tell him how she feels. Meanwhile, the celebration continues downstairs while Cyan stands at a distance, quietly watching Will. Julius approaches him and asks whether he feels sad now that he has lost the person he used to bully. Cyan replies that all of that belongs to the past. Now, he is happy because the pitiful look he once saw in Will's eyes has finally disappeared. Will notices them and calls out to Cyan, thanking him for everything he did for him. Cyan replies that if Will truly wants to thank him, then why not fight him? He immediately begins preparing his fire magic. Julius likes the idea and decides to join them. Both attack Will at the exact moment Colette enters the hall. Unfortunately, she does not even get a chance to speak to him. Elsewhere, an important conversation is taking place between Finn, Creedon, and Iris. Iris asks Finn not to take Will away from the tower and to allow him to enjoy his life. Finn replies that he has already done that and respected Creedon's wishes. However, everything will change if Will fails to progress at the level expected of him. Even Creedon is uncomfortable with that idea. They did not go through all of this simply to keep Will with them. There is a far more important purpose behind everything they have done. Returning to the celebration hall, the fighting continues until Professor Werkner arrives and stops them. He then asks Will to come with him because he wants to speak with him in private. The two sit together, and Werkner congratulates Will on how far he has come. Will replies that he would never have reached this point without him and thanks him for everything he has done. After that, Will asks whether there is any way for him to meet Olivia. Since he joined a different faction, openly meeting a member of the Magia Vander would be nearly impossible. But since when have either of them cared about rules? Werkner tells him that one of his students wants to meet him outside the tower. He then takes Will on the back of his dragon and brings him to the meeting place. That student is, of course, Olivia. She escaped from the tower just to meet Will. The moment she sees him, she runs toward him, throws herself into his arms, and begins crying like a child. She asks why he left her and chose to go with Zack. Once she finally calms down, Will explains his reasoning. He reminds her that their promise was for both of them to become members of the Magia Vander and then reach the sky together. He tells her that he truly wanted to stay with her. However, the right time has not arrived yet. Once he becomes one of the Magiavander, he will finally be worthy of standing by her side. That is why he agreed to go with Zack. Olivia becomes upset by his words, but she cannot argue with him. Will then tells her that he recovered some of the memories he had forgotten. He has not remembered all of them yet, but Creedon told him that his power will continue growing each time another part of his memory returns. Olivia becomes delighted by the news and immediately forgets her anger. She then tells him that she wants to see the sky with him. Using her magic, she creates a staircase of ice that reaches the top of the tower. The two climb it together and sit side by side, watching the sky from above. It is only a false sky they use to comfort themselves. One day, they will fulfill their promise and reach the real sky together. The following day, all the students who passed gather inside a lecture hall to attend an orientation explaining life inside the tower and how the different factions interact with one another. Sarah enters and congratulates them on passing. She then explains that this was originally supposed to be a normal orientation lecture. However, things are slightly different this year because they are about to receive a serious assignment. Their mission will be to spy on the factions they have joined. Everyone is shocked and cannot believe what they are hearing. Sarah explains that they gathered all the evidence connected to the Termanlia incident. Every piece of evidence pointed toward one conclusion. The enemy managed to enter with help from someone inside the tower. In other words, there is a traitor inside the tower, and discovering their identity will be their responsibility. The biggest question now is, who is the real traitor? Could it be one of the Magiavander, or is the traitor hiding within one of the other factions? With that, Season 2 of Will's story comes to an end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and follow the channel. See you in the next video. Peace.